You've entered Bookstorm. Your favorite authors are here to dive down deep into their best-selling books. Stay tuned to brave the storm.
Welcome back to Bookstorm Podcast listeners. I'm your co-host, Kristen Civiletto, and with me is Julia Rose. And we are thrilled that you are tuning in from 102 countries and territories, all 50 states. And we're just thrilled. We know why you're here. It's because we are bringing you the very best authors that are writing today. And today is no exception. We are so excited to welcome #1 New York Times bestselling and internationally bestselling author, Daniel Silva. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you guys for having me.
Well, we are very excited because we're here to talk about an inside job. And this book is fantastic. And listen, I have read many of your books. I think this is number 27 in total. Is that correct?
I hate to correct the host, but it's 28 if you can believe that.
28. That is fantastic. So 28. And how many of those books feature our protagonist, who by now is beloved in the literary world, Gabriel Allon?
Yeah, there are 25 of those. So this is my silver anniversary, I guess.
Awesome.
The interesting thing is that he was, never supposed to be a continuing character. He was supposed to appear in one book and one book only. Didn't exactly work out that way. And now here we are, 25 books and 25 years later, and Gabriel is still going strong.
That's pretty amazing. In fact, I think I remember when your initial books came out in 1997, you have two other enduring characters, Michael Osborne and international hitman Jean-Paul Delaroche.
Yeah.
And after that is when Gabriel Allon came on the scene, and that just kind of changed the direction of your career, correct?
I think it's fair to say that. He's actually sort of a spin-off from that previous series. He didn't appear in those previous books, but characters from those previous books spun into the Allon series. And I think it is fair to say. I think that while I was very proud of the Michael Osborne books, I knew that there was another gear that I could go to. I was looking for something a little more special. Yeah. And I created Gabriel, and as I said, I did not design him to be a continuing character. He was really supposed to appear in just that first book, and my publisher at the time said, you've done it. You've created a really dynamic, compelling character here, and you have to write another one. And excuse me, I didn't think it was a terribly good idea, to be honest with you. I thought he wouldn't work for a mass market audience. So no one is more surprised than I am that he's a multi-time New York Times #1 best-selling character.
Absolutely. Well, as we're going to see, he's a part-time art restorer, but also part-time Israeli spy. And because of that, he's got a lot of very interesting situations that he finds himself in, or maybe inserts himself into. We'll have to see. But in your case, as far as your background too, you also have a background in journalism before you started writing full time. And you have a tremendous amount of experience. I know that you reported on the Iran-Iraq war. And then you also produced for CNN. You were executive producer for Crossfire, Capital Gang, and Reliable Sources.
Yeah. And many more.
And many more.
And
That's
many
right.
more.
Well,
yeah, it was during that period that I informed my wife what I really wanted to do with my life, which was to be a novelist. And when she stopped laughing, she said, "Go ahead, write your first book, and we'll see what happens." So I would get up very early every morning and write for 3 hours, and then start my day. I produced, and was executive producer for 13 broadcasts a week at that time.
Wow.
And I wrote my first book entirely in secret. Got my publishing deal, and then had to tell my bosses that I needed to take a leave of absence to edit the book. It came as a big surprise to everyone.
Well, we're glad you did because you've brought so much entertainment and joy and intrigue to literally millions of people throughout the world. And so we're so excited to talk to you. I know Julia wanted to tell us a little bit about what's going on in your story without giving away spoilers.
Okay.
So I'd love to give our listeners some background on the book that we're going to be discussing today. And if there's anything that and like I said, no spoilers, but if there's anything that you want to add at the end, please feel free. So we have stolen masterpieces, secrets of the Vatican, murder, greed, corruption. This book has it all. And one of our beloved literary characters, Gabriel Allon, is back. He's been tasked with restoring one of the most important paintings in Venice. But when he discovers the body of a mysterious woman floating in the waters of the Venetian lagoon, he finds himself in a desperate race to recover a lost masterpiece by Leonardo da Vinci. The painting had been stored for more than a century in a storeroom at the Vatican Museum. It's a portrait of a beautiful young girl, and nobody realized it was painted by the master himself. But now it's gone, and a modern day young woman is dead. Gabriel moves from galleries to auction houses of London to an enclave of unimaginable wealth on the French Riviera, and finally to a shocking climax in St. Peter's Square, where the life of a pope hangs in the balance. We were breathless by the end of this novel, and we cannot wait for our listeners to be able to get their hands on it.
Okay. I have nothing to add except that you need to come on the road with me and introduce me every
You know
night.
what? I'm hired.
Perfect.
Deal. So I guess we'll start with the world of fine art, and particularly that of these master painters. At one point, a character, Sarah, says to Gabriel, "We're not all corrupt, you know. Some of us actually have standards." And Gabriel answers, "You'll get over that, I'm sure." And what does this say about, this arena, this field of fine art that invites intrigue and theft?
Look, I think
There
it's
was another character, Martin, who says art is money and never forget that. And, what, just kind of elaborate on that for us.
look, I think that the art world is just a wonderful cross current of wealth and power and greed and ambition. There are many, many wonderful collectors, people who love art and collect art for all the right reasons. And then there are a lot of people who just simply invest in art. Then there are a lot of really shady types who made their money in sometimes awful ways. And the first thing they do is go out and get themselves a fancy art collection to give themselves a patina of respectability. And so it's just a wonderful place to set stories of intrigue. So what Sarah was, Sarah is an art dealer. Look, there are many, many incredibly fine art dealers, and then there are also a lot of shady art dealers, and that's what Gabriel was pointing out. And Martin Landesman, a recurring character in the series, is an art collector himself, but pointing out the obvious that many people just see art as just yet another asset class, and they park their money in art. They stash the art away in free ports. They buy art under using shell corporations and use art to launder money and to conceal money, all of which I've explored in the series.
Yeah, lots of intrigue for sure. Well, I want to ask you then about something else, that kind of an undercurrent running through your story. I thought this story was incredibly entertaining, but more than that, it was also elegantly provocative. And I want to ask you about this because, Gabriel says that art theft is always an inside job. But I almost feel like he was referring to something else, maybe something bigger. And here's why. We hear a sermon that's preached by our fictional pope, Luigi Donati, based on Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Now, he decried the church's accumulation of wealth and its refusal to adopt and change. And he encouraged a different way of thinking for the church that centered around, a healthy, vital, merciful, and adaptable church, as he says. Is this sermon perhaps the foundation for an inside job and some change?
Well, that Luigi Donati, my fictitious pope, and he's a recurring character in the series. He's very much modeled on Pope Francis. And it turns out that he's also got a touch of Pope Leo to him. He's a liberation theologian. He was a missionary in Central America. And he definitely wants to take the church in a Francis-like direction. And that means that, Pope Francis famously said, that he wanted the church to focus on the needs of the poor and to be poor itself. And Luigi Donati would agree with that statement. And so this book was really inspired by two things. One, that, while Pope Francis took some doctrinal positions that angered a lot of traditional Catholics, what is less known about Pope Francis was that he was at war from day one with the Roman Curia over the issue of money. And he wanted to root out all of the corruption at the Vatican Bank, and the Vatican finances once and for all, and straighten out the mess that it has been for decades. And then the second aspect of it was that there was an unbelievable scandal a couple of years ago where a sitting cardinal was forced to resign and then put on trial. First time a cardinal's ever been put on trial before a Vatican tribunal. He was caught up in a real estate deal in London that lost the Vatican hundreds of millions of euros, and at the same time enriched his partners. So I borrowed from real life, mixed in a long lost Leonardo, and had a lot of fun with it. But at the core of it, that sermon, I'm glad that you cited that. I'm very proud of that sermon. I was on a radio program the other day, and the host said, "Now, did you base that sermon on one of Pope Francis's sermons?" I said, "No, I wrote that homily." I wrote the homily for the Pope, and I really, really am very proud of that scene.
Yeah. Well, it's cool too, because being based on the Sermon on the Mount, that was also a radical statement.
Oh my
And
gosh. Can you
right?
imagine, though? No, I mean, imagine in the ancient world how radical a statement the Ten Commandments are. Thou shalt not kill. I mean, killing your enemy and was an everyday occurrence. But yeah, I mean, the Sermon on the Mount is what's one of the most radical ideas and most beautiful speeches, sermons ever given.
Yeah. Yeah.
And uh, as I point out in the text, I mean that as early Catholics, followers of Jesus, memorize the Sermon on the Mount, and it's the reason why my fictitious pope became a priest in the first place, because of those words. And if you can love thy neighbor and live by the words of the Sermon on the Mount, you're in good condition.
Yeah. And also you got 3 levels of an inside job, because we had our Pope motivated on the inside by this, but we also see the foundations of an institution being shaken.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
Thank you.
How, just as a follow-up to that,
Mhm.
how important, or what is the impact of concealing your underlying motive when you're working on such a global stage, such as the Catholic Church and the Vatican? Because you said, imagine how radical things were back then when they were said on commandments and they were carved in stone and they were presented to people. And that might not have been well received. And this Pope seems to be doing things more in not secrecy necessarily, but slowly and steadily. Do you think that's important to his overall goal, or should he have come out of the gate swinging with all of the changes that he wanted to make?
No, I think that look, the Catholic Church has been around for 2,000 years. Um, Change has to be incremental. It has to be absorbed. It has to be, accepted by a broad swath of the church. A pope has less power to snap his fingers and make changes than people realize. He's got to summon a Vatican Council and bring all of the worldwide bishops together and get them to agree to a consensus and to vote on it. It's just not so easy. It's like a giant. I'm looking out at the Pacific Ocean right now and thinking of a giant oil tanker or cargo ship, and you need to start turning that thing miles ahead of time to reach your destination. And in real life, and he in within the fiction of the novel, you push too hard, you move too fast, you could break the church. You could create a schism, and popes are aware of that.
I love that metaphor of the turning ship because it really seemed like a lot of your characters were um, orchestrating things behind the scenes and operating on a need to know and letting information come out in little bits. So that was a cool image for your writing.
Thank you.
Um, so on the topic of crime and art, we encounter the Camorra in your book, an old mafia-like criminal organization found in a particular section of Italy. And Ingrid, a highly sophisticated thief, tells Gabriel that rule number one in the criminal world is never steal from Italians, and don't even think about stealing from the Camorra. I
Mhm.
love those lines, and I was curious of what underlines her advice. Is that just the fact that the
Oh,
Camorra is an established institution?
well, look, the Camorra is famously an ultra violent organization, and they have you know, terrorized Campania for generations. They, had horrible wars on the streets of Naples. And so you would tangle with the Camorra at great risk. So that's the way organized crime works. The threat of violence is what they use to keep everyone in line, and you do not want to mess with the Camorra in any respect, because they you will end up dead, and that's just all there is to it. And one of the most surprising things that I learned, was that this well-known Italian prosecutor uh, feared for Francis's life as he undertook reforms at the Vatican in terms of financial matters, because for many years, elements of the Italian mafia have been using the Vatican as a way to launder money, and Pope Francis was going to try to clean up this pipeline, and this Italian prosecutor was so alarmed by the prospect of harm coming to Pope Francis that he spoke up publicly and issued a warning.
Wow. So does that advice of, not messing with not just the Camorra, but Italians, does that apply to the Vatican as well because of what they have their hands in?
No, I wouldn't go that far, but um, look, the proximity of the Vatican is a sovereign country. Okay, and it has its own central bank, and that bank operates under conditions of strict secrecy. And regrettably, time and time again, um, that let's just say that priests and bishops and cardinals are not necessarily good money managers, and they have to rely on so-called men of trust, laymen, to help manage the Vatican's financial interests and financial holdings. And time again, those people have turned out to be corrupt and have dragged the Vatican into scandal over and over and over again. And that includes the Italian mafia, regrettably.
Yeah. I want to go back to this idea we were just talking about a minute ago, about this idea of a true nature of something. The
Mhm.
painting at the heart of this story is hidden behind the facade of another.
Mhm.
And of course, that's appeared in a few of your stories, and it's such an interesting concept in of itself. But all of your characters, the banks, the papacy itself, they also have adopted that same kind of device where there's something cloaking their true nature of what they're doing. We see popes with different names. We see where traditions may override the reality of a situation. So I wanted to ask you about this. I feel like Gabriel sees his friend, the Pope, in much the same way. He's cloaked with robes, with tradition, with the honor and respect due his office. But at the heart of it might be something very beautiful and very simple, just like that painting.
Yeah, yeah.
Would you agree?
Well, there. there have, Luigi Gennati was introduced in the third book of the Allon series 22 years ago. He's appeared in numerous books. I have a subset of books that are Vatican books, but I've also used the Vatican for smaller scenes with in other books. But Luigi has, I had to sit and count them all, but he's really appeared in numerous books. They have a very close relationship. And they hadn't seen each other in a couple of years. And that first scene where they reunited in this book, I really enjoyed writing that. And one of the reasons why I didn't let the reader know what Luigi's pontifical name is that I didn't want him to get lost behind that pontifical name. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why I give a little something away, but Luigi, Pope Gennati, His Holiness, likes to sneak out of the Vatican. And I used that device so that I could take that white cassock off him, put him in regular clothing, and think of him as just a human being and not His Holiness. That cassock, that big pectoral cross, it makes them unapproachable almost. I can tell you the names of all of the 20th century popes, the real names, but most people forget them. Once you become Pope Francis or Pope John Paul or Pope Paul, you get lost behind that identity. And so that's why I did a few little tricks to make sure that he remained Luigi Gennati, the man, first.
Yeah. Well, I love it because, Gabriel especially was able to always connect with his friend on that level, and because he knew his true nature of who he is. But we also see where you always in your books, you strip away a little bit more about Gabriel's true nature. And I think you did that really well throughout this book in the scenes with his family. Yeah. And their interaction, walking down the street, getting a gelato. And that's an enjoyable aspect of a series like this. We know this character better and better and better and better.
Yeah. So he's you said something at the beginning, that he's a part-time art restorer. I'd say he's a full-time art restorer now, and it's a subtle change in the series. But he and his wife run this important restoration company in Venice. He's a full-time art restorer now, and a retired spy. He used to be a spy. It's a subtle but not unimportant change to the series, and it does give me a little more freedom to spend a little time with his kids, now that they're older. And yeah. I will tell that you're not the only one to comment on those scenes. That I think that they're a really important part of this book, and why my readers have. I have to say, this is the 25th book. I've never had a reaction to a Gabriel Allon novel quite like this.
Awesome.
It's just been extraordinary. I did something right. I'm going to sit down and try to figure out what it is. But I obviously did something right, because the reaction has just been so overwhelmingly positive. It's really a nice thing to have happen, 25 books in that I could do.
That's excellent. And also the crackling dialogue with his wife. I think those are great interactions.
They are wonderful together. And a friend of mine remarked that the book read a little bit like Dashiell Hammett and Nick and Nora and the Thin Man, and I take that as a high compliment, because I love Dashiell Hammett.
Awesome. Well, I know Julia has a burning question for you.
Other burning
before we let you go.
Yes. So you should absolutely be basking in the how this book was received and all of that. So I don't want to rush you, but we are wondering if you are working on anything or have anything coming down the pipeline that you'd be willing to share with our listeners.
I learned a lesson a long time ago that to never talk about a book that hasn't been written yet. So I will say that I have terrible what I call let-go-itis. I find it very difficult to let go of a book, partly because I have to write them so quickly for my deadlines. But Leonardo da Vinci said that no work of art is ever finished; it's only abandoned. I would add that it's abandoned or taken away by a publisher. And so I work on it to the very last minute. and then I have to let it go, and I just sit and think, gosh, I wish I could have done this better, or would have done this better. I hope this works. And the only way for me to stop fiddling around and thinking about it is to get to work on a new book. So literally the day after I made the final edits on this book, I started writing the next book. So I think I have about 50 pages
Wow.
that I'm carrying around on tour with me. I haven't looked at it once. I haven't had the time, but when I come off tour, I'll sleep for a couple of days and get straight back to work. I love what I do. You know, people ask me, you know, what does it take to be a writer? How do I do it? And my first response is that you have to have a personality where you can't not write. I
Yeah.
heard a wonderful quote from Ann Patchett the other day that she called writing the best miserable job you'll ever have. And I think I
Oh,
don't think of it as a miserable job. I love what I do. I love spending time with my
yeah.
characters, but I do work all the time. I write every single day, 7 days a week. I find days off to be terribly dislocating, and it just interrupts the flow of things. And I'm just miserable when I'm not working on a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no clocking out when the story is up in your head.
Yeah, yeah, I just got to get them down on paper. I'm a non-sleeper. I sleep about 3 hours a night.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
I am working on the books all night long. I get out of bed as quickly as I can and try to write down everything I heard in the night before. So I love what I do. I think I'm the luckiest person in the world.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful that you gave us a little glimpse into your method, and we really appreciate that. But we're going to tell our listeners right now they've got to pick up this one, An Inside Job. It is fantastic, and it's got a beautiful cover besides. Our readers, I want to tell them they can find you at danielsilvabooks.com. And we wish you all the success in the world with this one. We love it, and we're so grateful that you came on the show to talk about it.
Thank you, thank you. I'm so glad we were able to do this. What a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Take care now.
Okay.
Well, now I'm really encouraged to join you in learning Italian.
I know this book is
Like, I
kind
need
of
to go to the
inspiring.
Vatican.
I'll tell you, I had a cool experience where I was at the Vatican after hours, unexpectedly. I think it was unexpected to the guards as well, but they were helping us find something. And as I was running through those halls, it was a really, really out of body experience because you're looking at these priceless artifacts and you're realizing there's a story behind everything that you are looking at. And that's what this book does. It kind of zeroes in on the story behind this, lost piece of a master. And really cool, very enjoyable.
Yeah, I need my own run through the after hours Vatican. So whenever we can get to that, I mean, let's go.
Stick with me. We got things. Well, I want to tell our listeners about some other fantastic authors that we have coming up on the show. We're just so thrilled. We've got Don Winslow with The Final Score, Lou Berney Crooks, A Family Portrait, Ashley Ream, The Peculiar Gift of July, Mariah Blake, They Poisoned the World, Life and Death in the Age of Forever Chemicals, Joanne Harris with the prequel The Chocolat with Vienne, Christina Baker Klein and Ann Burt, Please Don't Lie, Isabella Maldonado and Jeffrey Deaver, The Grave Artist, Laura Griffin with Innocence Road, Elma Katsu with Fiend. And listeners, we grow every week. We just thank you for sharing our socials, for commenting, interacting with us. We absolutely love it. You can find us on BOOKSTORMPodcast.com, Instagram, X, we're on YouTube, and we know why you're coming back again and again, because your favorite authors are live with us here on Bookstorm Podcast.